Do you want to build your own car setups for GT3 cars in Le Mans Ultimate? You really need to watch this video. And I know what you're thinking. You know, man, car setups, it's way too difficult. It takes too much time. I don't understand all the parameters and I get lost. As soon as I change something, I even get slower with my car setup changes. In this video, we're going to connect a system and we're going to be really clear on what we need to do. We have a few goals we need to focus on and we're going to do simple changes in 2 steps to get a car to behave on your liking. Now, the best part of this system is this is great for car exploration, and the more you use this system, the more familiar you get with it and the better you can make car setups in Le Mans Ultimate. Let's go. So whenever you start to build your own car setup, I suggest you go to the race weekend, you pick Spa. This is vital that we take Spa. The example is the McLaren. Now this is important. You want to make a situation where you always have the same testing conditions. This takes out all the variants. Now what you're going to do in advanced options, you're going to go to difficulty and you put on the tire warmers. This is a great new feature. This allows us to have the immediately proper tire temperature. So immediately we get the optimal car. It's really good. I want to point out, keep the variance the same whenever you're making your car setup, because then you can actually measure it, also for different cars in the future. Let's go to the track and explain what our first step is going to be. Here we are. We have all these different parameters. Yeah, what do we freaking need to change? Where do we need to start? Well, I will tell you how you should start to understand car setups with this system I'm using. So, what do we want to do? We want to push the max wing of this McLaren, yeah? And we're going to keep everything like it is. We're going to stick with that rear wing to the max because I want to know how fast this car is in the corners, what's the max potential of corner behavior. And if I set the max wing setting, then I can go to the first step of this system. A little bit of a time hack for you. I've been using these traction control settings also for the open setups, so or for the fixed setup. So if you're in the fixed setup, use that. And this is basically everything I do for now. What we did to the car setup, because I said to you push the rear wing, right? What influences this is going to have on the basic setup? Now I will show you right now with the model. We created the max wing setup, right? And I will explain this model a little bit. You want to think about the floor of the car being like this square vacuum creating under high speed situation. So the car is pulling to the road surface from the floor of the car from an aerodynamic standpoint. And what this does is if I increase the rear wing, we got additional pressure on the rear wheels under high speed situations. So we have this box here. And the box, we can influence its position with ride heights. So what we did now with the rear wing, we create a lot of additional pressure to the rear wheels. So the balance is now very understeery. And I will show you what understeer looks like in this situation. So we have the max rear wing setting and the aero box now is on a position that it's pretty much very understeery. So you will really see that in this corner section. Like, see, the car just doesn't wanna, the car is just very, this is understeer. The car just doesn't wanna turn as I'm going faster, as well as this. I can really be abusive, and obviously if I start swinging, then I will lose control. This is what we are creating with high wing setting. How do we solve this? Increasing the ride height will push the aero box forward, right? So we have additional pressure from the rear wing, making us super fast in corners. And when we increase the rear ride height, the box has a tendency to move forward. So imagine this air suction is being more pointed towards the front of the car, right? What are you going to do now in this first step? You're going to set the ride height and you want to focus on the next corner sections that we have the proper high speed rotation, because when you achieve this, you completed the first step and you will have a best balance of the car with this wing setting for every track in the game. That's the freaking best thing, because now you just like solved like 78 problems on every track. Let me show you how that looks. Now, we created the high wing. Now we go to suspension and we're gonna up the rear ride height to the max. What you also need to do is drop the packers to 0. These two things you need to do. So remember, maximum ride height, remove all the packers. This creates the aero box to move forward. The packers will get into step 2 because there's more tuning to need to be done to get desired behavior for your car on all the tracks. So let's do a rouge again. By the way, I have the full fuel here. I suggest, again, same with track conditions and all that stuff, take a value that like half the fuel and never ever switch to that, because if you do use different fuel levels, you will also get into the situation where you just don't know, oh yeah, but now it was full fuel, but oh no, now it was like half the fuel. So take always the same fuel level when you're doing these tests. Now you can see how my car all of a sudden got a lot of rotation. Like, do you see how easy it is to take our rouge now? So we can maybe like check the box green. Now we need to go to the next corner section. So now we have the next corner section. These corners are very important. Do we have the rotation here? Now you can see it's kind of still understeering. So I will explain in the second step what we need to change there. But the next really important corner is this one. We want to have full throttle on blanchiment. Now it's still kind of understeery, so but you want to have the desired rotation in these corners using the ride height. If you're liking this content this far, could you please hit that like button? And if we get this video up to 200 likes, we will, I don't know, maybe make a part 2 as well. Let's keep going. So we got a little bit of a situation where we still don't have the desired rotation under full throttle situation. So the box movement, we have the maximum rear ride height, we have the lowest front ride height. This is important as well, but like we still don't have the proper rotation. Now I will make a sheet in the pinned comment on all this, how to solve this in this setup build, but I would suggest now for the McLaren to create additional rotation. You can go 2 ways, but I would just go this way. This was really helping me. We increase the packers, so the packer distance starts to like be longer. So this means we have less suspension travel on the back. To create even more rotation on a fast corner situation, you want to increase the packer distance. Now I will show you if you're screwing around with these values when you did it too far. So like when did you push the packers too high and the ride height too high? This is what you get when you pushed it too far. You're doing our rouge, it's okay, but we're coming at radial and we'll just lose control in the back. Now this means the aero box was positioned forward too much and we just overdid it. We have too much packers and we have too much ride height. So then you went too far and you need to bring it back. You want to have with ride height and rear packer distance, you want to have a full throttle, or like that you don't need to lift a lot here in this corner. You want to have, when you go on throttle, you want to have rotation here. So you want to get into this corner and you want to get on the throttle all the way to this point to have that proper rotation. And that also counts for blanchiment corner. The fastest guys will not lift in this corner. And if you need to do that, you just need to increase the ride height and increase the packer distance to get that desired behavior. You ignore every other corner. We don't care about this. We also don't care about any other values in our car setup. We just want to get this done. If you have this, then we go to the next step. So the next step is the braking. how fast and how good are we on the braking. So we talked about the packer distance, right? And we want to think about braking as this arrow box. We set the outside box into the ride heights. Now we want to talk about the braking. And obviously when we're braking hard, we get the front tires. With the weight transfer, we get a lot of load on the front tires. Yeah, we increase the ride height a lot, and this might make the car very oversteery on some situations. Now, we are going to pick out a corner section on Spa again to make a fail-safe, to make this very aggressive car safer than it was before. So there are two components to this, and that is the packer distance on the front and brake bias. Lowest brake bias will make us very, very quick, but it's also getting really dangerous. And this next corner section, we're going to determine how far we can push these values. And that will be the Puhan corner and this corner section. Now, with the high rear wing setting, this corner and the braking is really forgiving. If you're going into, like, let's say 50% wing, then this corner gets really dangerous, and it's really important for the packer distance on this section and front packer distance on this section in combination with brake bias. If you want to push down the brake bias for performance, and you want to, let's say, have the least packer distance to create bunch of rotations. But if you have oversteer situations on the Puhan and oversteer situations in these corner, the next corner you're gonna approach, then you just have not enough packer distance on the front, or you have a too low of a brake bias. Now, in this example, I will show you what too low of brake bias is. So here we are in the Puhan corner. So it's a really extreme situation for a car. Now this feels kind of good. I feel the back end is already really light, so I'm on the limit. But this corner section is also very important because we have a lot less pressure from the rear wing. So if we approach this corner, so you can see how it's like the initial moment of the braking, I start to lose it, I start correcting it. So this means we have too low of a brake bias in combination with packer distance. Now, I was pushing it very low, as you can see on the bottom left. So I would go for high wing setup, something like this, or something like this for the McLaren. Now, how does this work? Well, I pushed this to the minimum to show the example. In the Puhan with the high wing, I got a lot of pressure, so I can get away with this low brake bias, but obviously on the rest of the track, that might be a bit too much. So the brake bias is going to be vital to make this safety. And the best thing is you can change it real time. So if you're really pro, then you might think like, oh, some corners I can do it higher or lower. But what really helped me is just to set a certain brake bias. So basically you take the brake bias that the game gives you and try to decrease it at the point where you cannot control it anymore, and then you pushed it too far. Packer distance. So the Puhan corner, packer distance. If you get oversteer on Puhan, you need to increase the packer distance. What does this do? And let's talk about packers in general, so you get a real deep understanding how you should adjust them. Think to yourself, man, this is too much work. I already built a McLaren pack for Le Mans Ultimate where we have different skill levels high downforce, different skill levels low downforce, and a mid preset with detailed information about the McLaren, how to install the setups, where to look out for. Even there's a special solver. So if you really don't want to get into it doing everything yourself, maybe check this out. And that link will be in the description. So whenever we're braking, the packer distance is going to determine how much the box is going forward under the braking. So if we have very high packer distances, this means we have a lot less variance in here. So it creates aerodynamic stability when we go for very high packer distances. Very high packer distances mean we do not have a lot of suspension travel. Now, if you want to be quick, you want to have it to 0 because that creates also mechanical grip. It complements mechanical grip, but also it creates more biting front end on the front packers. So if you have a very long packer distance, this box can move around a lot, so that creates a lot of understeer on throttle, but it also creates a lot of oversteer on the braking. Like in the previous step, we are pushing very higher packer distances to create rotation to keep the inside blue box into like a more forward position, but then when we're braking and we don't have any packers, this shifts forward all of a sudden, and that can create a lot of like oversteer in corners where you are braking. Increasing the packer distance on the front will reduce the oversteer. Now, I will put a pinned comment in my Patreon for free. I will put there a solver that you can just print out next to your rig, and then you can have the solutions in this basic setup build ready. Now, this is high downforce setting. We can also go for a low wing setting. You need to start back at step 1 and figure out the first corner sections with packer distances and ride heights. Okay, what about low wing setup? Yeah, you want to use the low wing setup, you want to try it out, and you want to drop the rear wing to 2.4 on the McLaren. I don't know what this is for other cars, but it's very simple. Use the 2 degrees. I believe the 2 degrees are pretty good. Yeah, if you can do it even lower, but I cannot drive it on the 0.4. It's not enough pressure on the rear wheels, and you want to remove the rake a lot because we don't have pressure on the back, so the aero box needs to be backwards with a low wing setup. And I also increased these packer distances. You can just take these over. So think about low wing setup, that the car needs to be way flatter and needs to have more packer distance under the braking is going to be important, and we want to have a lot higher brake bias because that creates safety in our very loose end that we created. Now you really want to try this out for every car, so you want to build a high wing setup and you want to build a low wing setup, and you want to compare them, and you will find that low wing is absolutely the way to go, especially for on Spa, but also different tracks, because with the high wing setup you'll be a sitting duck, but you can create a very nicely rotating car as well with the low downforce setup. I'm fully aware that we're not covering all of the parameters, but that just creates overwhelm in my eyes. Now, if you want a detailed video about how to create a low downforce setup for GT3 cars in Le Mans Ultimate, then we need to hit that like goal, and then that part 2 will be up here. Thanks for watching.